I wanted to make this video to wrap up my first year as a founder here in Japan and to discuss my 4 biggest mistakes that I made. So the first mistake that I made, which is it's about hiring. And given my background as an agency recruiter, it's pretty ironic that this is one of my biggest mistakes. So to break it down, when I say hiring, I made several mistakes actually when it comes to hiring. The first one is that, so we incorporated the company in January, and I think by February we were already 5 people, and I started to hire before developing a culture, developing clear role expectations for people. And it resulted in the fact that I had a mismatch with 2 co-founders very early. It also resulted in me hiring someone and having to let her go after only 3 months, I think. We also had one other person, like more on a freelance base, but still had to let him go after 1 month. And all this to say is that those people were actually fantastic. There's nothing wrong about them. It was really all on me. And it resulted, like I say, in people, joining and leaving. And I think in the history of companies, in the history of startups here in Japan, we might have the worst retention ever so far. And it really all comes down to my poor leadership. Mistake number 2, a lack of focus and spreading myself too thin. And it's also pretty ironic because I've been warned about this so many times. Like the people around me, the company owners and founders around me that kind of mentor me, they all told me this constantly, like, Axel, you're lacking focus, you're spreading yourself too thin, and I did not listen. It resulted in, again, me trying to do so many things at the same time. Like, we were trying to run 1 event a week, we were trying to organize some kind of hackathon, we were trying to do some kind of venture studio business where we were helping other founders for equity. In the meantime, I also had to do the business development for the recruitment business. I had to, generate revenue. We had to build up a branding. So I was just taking so much on my plate. There are a couple of reasons how I ended up there. The first reason is that when you become self-employed, you have that sense of freedom that you start seeing opportunities absolutely everywhere. And I think my biggest mistake back then was that I could not say no to opportunities. Like, the second reason, I think, is also because when I started my recruitment agency, there is a lot of stigmas around recruitment here in Japan. And for me, I really want to change that. And because I want to change that, I kind of try to do everything in my power to not be seen as a traditional recruitment agency. And so by trying so hard to be different, I ended up doing nothing. In the end, right now, what I realize is we can be a traditional recruitment agency as long as we focus on providing so much value that people forget about the stigmas. And this is exactly what we do now. Anyway, all that to say that lack of focus got me into the hospital back in May. I had a burnout and I collapsed from a panic attack. So it really comes to say that when people around you tell you that you're lacking focus and you're spreading yourself too thin, you should probably listen. The third mistake, when I started with the company, I've always been someone who has been under the belief that it's okay to tell people something in the quickest and most efficient way, as long as you believe it's in their best interest and as long as you believe it's the truth. And it's something that, because I never really been in a leadership position, it never really got to a point where people were actually suffering from my actions. They could simply ignore me. I realized that, often I will see my team doing certain things and I will just kind of tell them exactly why I think it's shit. And I wouldn't really sugarcoat it because I believe that time is everything, and in order to win time, I will be straight to the point. And so I ended up creating a very toxic environment. I also didn't show much appreciation for when people did a good work, because back then my belief was always, well, it's your job to do a good job. And being in a position where, I'm supposed to create a good culture and create a pleasant atmosphere to work in, this is somehow something that completely changed my perspective on everything. And it happened when someone that I look up to a lot, he was working with us, and one day he did call me out, and he told me that basically he didn't feel like being appreciated for his work, and he didn't feel like I cared about them. He told me straight up, you're creating a very toxic environment. And that really did hurt me, because I was all about the opposite. I was like trying to motivate everyone. I was working the hardest in the room all the time. But in the end, I was creating a very toxic atmosphere. What I really take from this whole story that I just explained is that there is really a fine balance between efficiency and simply being kind and making sure that people stay for the long run. Because in the end, the last thing I want is to be successful and be an asshole. I'd rather be a good human being and not successful in business than the opposite. Mistake number 3, coming down really to, lack of showing appreciation to the people around me. The 4th and final mistake that I want to talk about that I made is that I did put a lot of stress and a lot of the burden from my, ambitions as a founder on my family, and specifically on my wife and my kids. And so I have often come home bringing in like this bad atmosphere at home. And one day, in April, May, I snapped at my daughter, and I realized that she was avoiding me. And she's 2 years old. So it really struck me that when I started this whole venture, I was conscious that I was going to sacrifice time with my family. But I was somehow under the belief that you can kind of pause the time and you can kind of take it from where you leave it, but that's simply not true. I realized that my daughter was getting more and more closer and closer to my wife, and less and less, inclined to come towards me. From there on, I bring her out to the daycare every day, and I spend every morning with her. I try to be home before she goes to sleep to spend some quality time. I leave my cell phone at the door as well, which is a massive one. One of the biggest mistakes is the 4th one, is really that nothing matters in terms of accomplishments if in the end the people for whom I do this, are just suffering and are miserable and have no respect for me and what I do. So it's been a very interesting year. Starting a company here in Japan is something that I love doing. Like, I love my job every day. It doesn't feel like work. I think it's important to take a step back every now and then and make sure to not make the same mistakes. I'm sure my second year, 2025, I'll make a bunch of new mistakes, and I'm very excited to make that kind of video as an update. But I wanted to make this video to share what I've learned so far as a founder during my first year. I'm very excited for the next one to come. It would be great if you could, write down in the comments which mistakes you made in 2024 and what you learned from it. Like, I love learning from my mistakes, but I even love more learning from other people's mistakes. And yeah, again, I make those videos to connect with like-minded people, so feel always free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if what I say resonates. And yeah, it's all about connecting and sharing and growing. So let's do this. I'll wrap this up. It's time for me to cook for my family, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.